This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so welcome to the exploration meeting unique method video. I'm going to do this exploration meeting on Toby, but what we'll do is I'll try and do it as well as I can, as if it were in a live client situation. But I will potentially sort of step aside and explain a couple of things as to why I've done them that way. But hopefully this will give you an example of what I think an exploration meeting should look like and how you can do the same. And ideally, I would try and copy as much as I do here as possible, because I've tried so many different ways over the years that you might as well make life easy for yourself and copy as much as possible. Okay, so Toby, thank you very much for coming in. Nice to see you. Let's start off by just thinking, what are you looking to get out of the financial planning process? What are you looking to achieve from these meetings that we're going to have together?
I think whilst I'm still working, I'd like to build up a substantial retirement fund. I've got an ISA and a pension, and I like to build up enough money to fund my retirement so I can live comfortably.
Okay, brilliant. Anything else?
I've always liked travelling. I haven't had any money though to go back to Japan, unfortunately. So that's one thing I'd love to do, go back there.
Okay, brilliant. So we've got to get the finance working a bit harder for us by the sounds of things, the pension, the ISA, get you a plan that allows you to do some more travelling, maybe go back to Japan. Anything else?
Well, actually, yeah, if I could afford to go back to Japan, I'd always love to go skiing there. I've been into skiing, actually snowboarding. Unfortunately, I haven't had the money to do that. So if I could have the money to go back to Japan and afford to go snowboarding there, that would be brilliant.
Fantastic, that sounds brilliant. Anything else?
No, I think that's about it.
So, well, my job here today is to try and find out as much as possible about your situation, because the more I can find out, the better the financial plan that we can create for you and the better future that we can help you create. So I can definitely look at the finance stuff, the pensions and the ISA stuff, and getting you back traveling and maybe incorporate some snowboarding or skiing in Japan there. But is there anything else that you would really like to change about your current life or about your future plan?
Well, yeah, I mean, I currently live in a 3-bedroom house. I'd love to move up the ladder, maybe afford a bigger house. In addition to the extra travelling, I'd also like to get another car, maybe change my car, get a new car.
Yep.
But yeah, that's it really.
And nothing else that you can think of?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, brilliant. That's fantastic. So that's a really good start. Good to understand what your priorities are. So the aim of today's meeting really is 3 things. First thing is to explain how we work, so you've got a clear understanding of what we do and when we do it. Second thing is to make sure we both understand your current situation, because only really once we understand that can we try and give you some advice. But finally, and most importantly, today is about understanding what's important to you in the future, because only really once we both have a clear idea of what that is, can we help you create a plan for it. So we're going to work through in that sequence, if that's okay.
Yeah.
In order to explain how we work, I've got this pack of information I'm going to give you here. Now, I'll show you what's in the pack, but I'm going to use this document to pick out all of the key points. So within the pack, we've got our client brochure, which is the nice sort of client-friendly document, as it were. It kind of explains the process in a slightly more gentle, client-friendly way. What we've then also got is our client agreement and key facts document. You may have seen something similar to this before, but this is essentially our terms of business, and this is the more regulatory document that is slightly less easy to digest. But these are in the pack for you to take away. As I said, I can pick out all the key points in this document here in the exploration meeting guide. And the first page covers a couple of really important points. First is we're authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, as I'm sure you would expect. And the second is that what we do here at Efficient Portfolio is truly independent financial planning. Now, I'll come back to what I mean by truly independent in a minute. By independent, that means we give you advice on the whole market. We're not limited to a number of, or one or a number of common products like some of the providers out there. We can give you advice on the whole market. Next page, again, just talks about a couple of other important concepts. We're a chartered firm, which puts us in the top 7% of all advisory practices in the country. And what we do differently to most of our industry is that we focus on financial planning rather than just financial advice. Now, what I mean by that is, by financial advice, I can find you lots of people that will advise you on a pension or advise you on an ISA, but much fewer that will design you a proper financial plan that's going to build your financial future for you. So what we're thinking about there is the resources that you've got available to you today, what goals and priorities you've got for the future, what events are likely to happen along the way, the time frames and the level of risk that is appropriate for you. Because I believe once we've built this financial plan first, the financial advice we can give you later is much better. So the type of retirement advice and the investment advice we can give you is much more in line with your future because of that financial plan. One of the most commonly asked questions in this meeting is how we get paid, so we may as well cover that early on. Our industry, there's really two ways that you can pay for advice. It's working on a fee basis, same way you pay your accountant or your solicitor. And then there's something that tends to muddy the water a little bit, which is known as commission. Now, with commission, you still pay for the cost of the advice, but you pay through the charges of a contract that's been recommended. So you may pay an extra £10 a month in charges instead of a £1,000 fee, but either way, you need to be absolutely clear you're paying for the cost of the advice. There's no magic life insurance companies in the sky handing out free advice. So we've been working on a fee basis, and we've done that since we were founded in 2006. And we do that for two main reasons. First is we think that's the only way we can give you truly independent advice. That means our fees are always exactly the same, regardless of the provider or the solution that we recommend. And secondly, it allows us to cover a much wider aspect of financial planning. So whilst the traditional financial advisors out there tend to forget, ignore a lot of the areas that we think are important to financial plan, we can incorporate things like wills, estate planning, deposit-based savings, tax planning. All of those sorts of things are key components to the financial plan, but they often get forgotten. Now, by working with us on a fee basis, there's two important things to remember. First is that you'll never get a fee that you weren't expecting. So before you do any work that's going to incur a fee, we'll want your permission to proceed on that basis. And the second thing is, and this may or may not be relevant in your situation, if our advice is to put a product in place that does generate a commission, then that commission is yours to do whatever you want with. You can use that commission, if you like, to offset some or all of our fee, as most of our clients would do, but ultimately our fees will remain the same regardless of how you choose to pay them. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that there's sometimes some tax benefits and some cash flow benefits for using commission to offset. So if that is an option for some of the advice that we're giving you, then we will we'll recommend the best approach, but ultimately it'll be up to you how you pay those fees. Last page is just really explaining the process that we lead each client through. So today's meeting, as I've already said, is really about understanding where you're at the moment and where you want to be in the future. If at the end of today's meeting you want our advice, we'll go away and build your own bespoke financial plan, which we call Efficient Financial Plan. We charge a flat fee to do that work, and I'll be able to tell you at the end of today's meeting what that fee is, just as soon as I know what work's involved. But that fee, unusually, is covered by a 100% money back guarantee. So even if you were to get a plan and think, what on earth are these idiots on about, then no questions asked, you can have your money back. Included in the plan, there'll be three main areas. There'll be analysis of your existing financial planning or those existing ISAs and pensions that you've already mentioned, to see what's good and what's not and how we can make some improvements. Then there'll be our recommendations and approach going forward. That'll be all of the financial planning recommendations we've included, or we talked about today. And then finally, there'll be the most cost-effective way of implementing each of those ideas. Now, included in the cost of the financial plan is also the cost of a planning meeting. So once you've had a chance to read the plan, and we'll send it to you both electronically and in the post, we'll get back together, because no doubt you'll have a long list of questions that you want to ask us. There'll be some bits that make more sense than other bits, some bits you like more than other bits. And in that planning meeting, we can really make sure that you understand everything. If we've built you something like a lifetime cash flow forecast, and I'll explain more about that later on, then we'll look at the different scenarios that we've modeled for your future, and we can talk about those, and we can just make sure that A, you understand everything, and B, you can make some decisions around which bits, if any, you like and want to move forward with. If you like some of the ideas, then we'll be able to implement all of those ideas for you. My team will take all of the legwork out of that for you. And that can be where the process ends if you wanted to. We can drift apart, and you can shout at us the next time you need help if that's the way you prefer to work, because that's the way most of our industry works. However, our existing clients tell us that they get the greatest value out of what we do for them thereafter. So if you want to become one of our ongoing clients, we'll make sure we see you regularly. And we've got a number of different tiers of ongoing service so that you can pick a level that's right for you. And that'll include things like regular face-to-face update review meetings, and regular updates by email, and as I say, there's different tiers that you can select from to make sure it's the service that's right for you. So that's the process that we lead everybody through. Any questions with any of that?
No, that all makes sense.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'll put that back aside for now, and because there might be a couple of other documents that we need in there later on. So you very kindly filled out your Portfolio Explorer. Thank you for doing that. What I want to do now is just dive into that detail and just kind of check that we understand everything. But before I do that, is it okay if I record this part of the meeting? Because that helps make sure that my note taking doesn't have to be quite as detailed now. Is that okay?
Yes, certainly. That's
brilliant. Okay, so you've done a really thorough job of completing all of this. That's all fairly straightforward. So let me just add. Let me share the screen so we can see what I'm doing. So what I just wanted to clarify, when you say about your salary and bonus there, that is classed as bonus, and then the rest is classed as dividends, is that right? Yeah, okay, fine. It's always just good to clarify everything that's going on in the income boxes here, because that's obviously really quite important. Rather than talk you through this as the client, I'm going to talk you through this as what I'm thinking as the advisor. Okay. So I will always double check these, the earnings are in the right category, so we completely understand that. I'll always just think about what they've put in terms of their retirement age. We're going to come back to this conversation later on, but it's worth thinking about that. I'll have already read these prior to the expiration meeting, so personally I don't talk about those at all at that moment in time, because we're going to come back to that later on. I will always just find out a little bit more about the parents that are alive. Just make a note to say, hopefully they've already filled in the geographical location, but I'll just ask them if they're in good health or not. Then for their children, I'll want to know a little bit about what they're doing. Are they off at university? Are they doing a job? It's good to know a little bit more about them. And again, the same with grandchildren. So it's good to just fill in a few notes about these, about the family tree. Then what I will do is I will go through and just try and understand a little bit more about what protection policies they've got. Try and fill in any gaps. And sometimes the best way to highlight things that aren't being done very well is to ask questions. So instead of saying, you haven't got enough life cover, you might ask them the question, you know, what was the thinking behind the amount of life cover that you have? What you will generally find is that there is no thinking behind it. It's there, you know, they've had that life insurance policy for 15 years because it was based on a mortgage. So by asking questions like that, you're getting them to realise that the cover is inappropriate as opposed to telling them. You know, I think the best principle for the exploration meeting is more questions and less lectures. So if you can ask more questions that highlight shortfalls, then it will become far more powerful. So I'd go through the protection questions. You want to fill in, you know, just check they haven't forgotten things like death in service, you know, company provided benefits, because quite often people will do that. We'll then move on to pensions. Again, it's about filling in gaps. I don't spend ages on this section with the client because hopefully they filled out most of it for you. Ultimately, you're going to then fill out most gaps through the info chasing that's going to happen after the exploration meeting. But you kind of want to know roughly how much money is in there, what type of scheme it is. Now, I don't want to give advice during the exploration meeting. I think this is about a data gathering exercise. It's not about giving them lots of advice. It's not about trying to sell them different things at this stage. It's about understanding and asking questions to do so. The one area I will tend to spend a little bit longer on, though, is if they do have a final salary pension scheme, I think it's good to ask some questions around their understanding of their options, because sometimes they'll already know that transferring out is an option and that's something they're keen to look at, but many times clients won't even know that that is an option. So it's just good to get an understanding of their understanding about final salary schemes. And if they don't know that these are even options, then I would normally give a little bit of an explanation as to what their options are with that type of scheme, just so that they're in a position where they can then make an informed decision as to whether they want advice on that or not. So again, just carry on through here, trying to fill in any gaps, but trying to get an understanding of the full situation, but not having to focus in on minute detail, because ultimately you're going to fill in those gaps through the info chasing anyway. I definitely always ask if there's money in savings accounts, is it earmarked for a particular thing? You know, sometimes somebody will have a lump of money sat in savings, but it might be earmarked for tax or, you know, a house development. So that's good to know. Again, with properties, sometimes people will forget to put their primary residence in here. Sometimes people have now got into the mindset that we're only asking about investments. So just make sure that you got their primary residence details as well, and really good to get rental information and mortgage renewal dates and things like that for all of the properties, including buy-to-lets. Usually they'll have done a fairly good job at filling this in. If they do say yes, they've got trusts, then you want to try and understand what trust, because it might be that they've just got a trust that their life insurance policy's in, but they might have nothing with their will. It's just good to clarify this here. Monthly expenditure. If they haven't done that in the Your Portfolio Explorer document, I personally wouldn't spend any time with them trying to go through this in the exploration meeting. I would just say, look, we'll send you this afterwards. If it's the sort of client that you think this is going to be a problem getting information out of afterwards, then what you might want to do is just say, look, can you give us an idea of a total monthly expenditure so that you've got something you can base a lifetime cash flow forecast on in the future. But ideally, you're better off sending this as part of the exploration meeting follow-up, saying, please, can you complete this afterwards, if they haven't done so already. But most people will have completed it beforehand. Really good to go through and clarify these questions here, just to understand, you know, is there inheritance likely? I always tell everybody, I assume everybody lives to age 100, because it takes the emotion out of the anything. And I would ask them if they want to include any potential inheritances in the financial plan. Some people will say, yeah, yes, it makes sense, and always build that onto a fairly conservative figure. But other people would prefer just not to have the expiration, the lifetime cash flow forecast assume any inheritances. They want to make sure they're okay on their own, which makes a lot of sense, particularly if it's debatable as to whether there's going to be inheritance at all. So it's just worth really clarifying this. And this, of course, is just so that you can build a more accurate lifetime cash flow forecast. Personally, I don't go into any of this information during the expiration meeting, because this is what I'm about to come on to with the life planning section. And again, it's useful. Obviously, you'll have read the expiration, your Portfolio Explorer beforehand. So any other information, hopefully you've picked up on that. Sometimes I'll put a lot of information in that. At most times, though, that box will be left blank because you've picked off everything earlier on. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to how I would talk to the client. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for going through and clarifying that. That's really, really useful. And what I want to do now is I want to look into the future. I want to look at what, ask you a few questions around what's important to you in the future. So I want you to imagine that you've got all the money you need to be financially secure for the rest of your life. So money is now no object.
Okay.
How would you live your life differently?
I think I'd probably have some kind of life insurance in place, just to make sure debts and stuff like that are covered.
Sounds like the answer of a financial advisor. I've never had that said in this section of the exploration meeting from a client.
Yeah, I think I probably just live life generally, be a lot less stressful, I suppose.
What do you mean by live life generally? What would you be doing?
Spend more money on travel.
More travel, okay. You already mentioned Japan.
Already covered, yeah. Japan would definitely be on the list.
And skiing, you said?
Skiing there, yeah. Probably a couple of beach holidays as well. I've got a couple of friends in Australia, so it'd be good to go there and do some traveling. Less work as well. Everybody was no object.
Okay, great. So to less work, but still doing work in the finance sector, or do you think?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Just cutting hours.
Brilliant. And with all of that extra free time, other than travel, what else would you be doing at that time?
I'd like to study, brush up on my Japanese and other languages as well. I did French and Russian at school, so probably something that I enjoy studying.
Great.
And then probably more of an effort keeping fit, I suppose.
Okay, brilliant. So more travel, particularly around Japan, but also beach holidays in Australia. Bit less work. That would free up the time to study more languages, keep fit. Anything else?
Potentially, if I had more time on my hands, new business ventures, property development would be quite interesting as well.
Okay, great. Anything else?
More scuba diving. I'd also like to take up sailing as well, learn how to sail. That would be fun.
Brilliant. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, well that sounds like a pretty good list to me. Fantastic. Sounds like a brilliant life. So to think about things slightly differently now, I want you to imagine that you go to see your doctor, and your doctor says that you've got between 5 and 10 years left to live. Now, you're not going to feel sick during this time. Equally, you're not going to know when your time is up. How would you live your life differently now? So you've got 5 to 10 years left to live. You're not going to feel ill. You're not going to know when your time is up. How would you live your life differently now?
I'll probably focus on things that matter more. I tend to do quite a bit of DIY stuff like that myself.
So what do you mean by?
Probably get someone in to do all that, let the professional do it, and that'll free me up with time. And then I can spend the things that I'd like to be doing.
Like?
Motorbikes, learning how to sail, and traveling. They'd still be on there. I think also seeing more of my family as well. My sister lives abroad. So yeah, that'll probably.
Anything else?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay, brilliant. And then to ask you one more question of this on this track, and by the way, as you probably work, they're gradually getting worse. I want you to imagine you go back to your doctor, and this time your doctor's got some really shocking news, and that is that you've got 24 hours left to live. Now, what would you be thinking about in that 24 hours? You know, specifically thinking about, not so much doing, but what would you be thinking about in that 24 hours in terms of, you know, what have I missed? What's unfinished? What's unfulfilled? You know,
places I haven't gone to, but I would also, I mean, I know you mentioned that would be financially secure, but I'd also be thinking about my loved ones and making sure they were comfortable and everything was set up and planned for.
Okay.
That'd be for sure.
So it sounds like travel and family.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So I want to think about this in a slightly different way now. If as a consequence of our work together, we could create a moment in time, maybe 18 months from now, and you're in Japan, and you're looking across this amazing view, the cherry blossom is blooming, and you just got this most incredible view. And this is towards the end of your holiday in Japan, and you know the sun setting over the cherry blossom. Maybe you've got something like sake in hand, and you know you just had this amazing trip, and you know you've done this trip because you've got yourself into a financial position where you know that yes, you've got the money working harder for you, and you've got the financial backing behind you that you need, but genuinely you've also can now afford to do this trip, and actually you've got a plan to make more trips back to Japan, because over the course of the 18 months you've also been getting back into speaking Japanese. And whilst you're at the end of this trip, you're looking at this amazing view, but you're actually really excited to get back because you've got your other business ventures going, you know, you've got the advising stuff is going well, but you also started to pick off a little bit of property development as well, and you've got a plan for that. So you're actually really still itching to get back to the UK to do that. So how would it feel to be in Japan, watching the sunset over the cherry blossom, sake in hand, having had that amazing trip, knowing that you worked really hard to get to that point, but also being so excited to get back here to carry that on? How would that feel?
Well, brilliant. I think if you feel content, I suppose, I'll be looking for the next challenge or something to do at that point. I think it would be a relief and a milestone, I suppose.
Okay, fantastic. So one last question on this then. What could get in the way? What could stop you?
I suppose, well, other than finances, health.
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah, potentially poor planning if I haven't got things in place.
Yeah. Poor stroke no plan. Yeah.
Lack of investment growth as well. You know, if my pension is going to go south, that would be a concern for me. Or if I can't afford to save as much.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. And so if we were sat here 9 months from now, looking back, what do we need to have done for you to be happy with the progress that we've made?
Well, I'd like my investments to be going in the right direction. That would be a relief. I'd like to have the peace of mind that my family are going to be looked after when I'm no longer around.
Yep.
I think also actually achieving everything you say you will. I've been to see financial advisors in the past and they haven't delivered what they promised. So that would be.
So. Okay, yeah. Anything else?
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. And last question then, what would we need to do to wow you? What would make you say, wow?
Cash flow forecasting sounds interesting. I've not seen that before, so I'm interested to learn more about that. I think if, ultimately, though, if I can achieve everything that I like to achieve, that would be the ultimate, wouldn't it? Ideally, within 3 to 5 years.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for going through that. That's really helpful. That's really given me a much better understanding of what's important in the future. Just as an aside, so advisor commentary, I suppose, the key things I'm trying to do here is you'll notice that I'm really trying to get anything else out. I used exactly the same tactic as I used in the first question. So if we're running dry, I'll use anything else. And then what I'll also do is summarize what you've told me, because that almost decompartmentalizes it in the client's brain, and then use anything else again. Because then that's like, right, he's got all of that. I know that I don't have to worry about that bit. I can now think of something new. And it's just a really nice way of kind of, right, brilliant. We've got those 3 ideas. I like that. Anything else? So that's a really nice way of getting more out of them. You'll notice that I'm not saying these word for word. I'm saying them in my own words, but it's really important. The most important bit for those questions is the last bit of the question, which is of the first 2, how would you live your life differently? Because what you're immediately implying is they wouldn't live it differently, is just how. Because if you just say, as I've heard other advisors do, how would you live your life? It's very easy for them to say, well, I'll just leave it the same. But by how would you live your life differently, immediately is, you're working on the assumption it is going to be different, now just tell me. Now, occasionally you'll get people that will say, no, I'm really content and I'm really happy. And that can be fine, and depending on the situation, that can be fine. But also you sometimes think, well, that's just really a lack of imagination. So sometimes what you can do is say, well, okay, if we apply the overnight test as well, which is what I call it, which is if we switched everything you own to cash. So you sold your house, all your investments have gone, you didn't have the job that you got, you're applying, for a new job. Would you go back and do exactly the same? Would you buy the same house? Would you still live the life in the current format that you're living? Would you still do all of the things that's currently going on? Because quite often when people fear change. So when you take away the principle of change, then sometimes they will say, actually, you're right. I probably wouldn't buy that house. I'd probably do this slightly differently. I probably wouldn't do this job, or I probably wouldn't do all of the trips that I'm doing at the moment. I'd probably do something. So it's just another good way of teasing out some goals, because a lot of people aren't very good at thinking about this stuff. So you're genuinely trying to help them. You're not trying to force them into things that aren't important to them, but you're trying to help tease out these priorities. With the Kinder question number 2, you'll notice I made the slight slip up of 3, then I switched it to 5 to 10 years. That's because I will change the time frame depending on the age of the client. So for a younger client, I'd always do 5 to 10 years. But if they're north of 70, quite often, maybe even 65, quite often they've got the mindset they're in their last 5 to 10 years anyway. So you're not asking them anything new. So by shortening it to 3 to 5 years, you focus their attention in the same way that saying to a 40-year-old, 5 to 10 years focuses their attention. And then lastly, I really try and emphasize on Kinder 3 that this is about what you'd be thinking about, not what you're doing. Because immediately people go to the default of, well, yeah, I'd want to spend the day with my family. Yeah, there's not much you can do in 24 hours, is there? So you're trying to get them to think about what they're to be thinking about. So it's, the sort of stuff that you answered the question was absolutely right in terms of, I haven't been to these places, is my family going to be okay? That's what the answer should be, but you've got to get them to see past what they're actually doing in the 24 hours. With the torch, lighting the torch, it's really important that you start off with that. If as a consequence of our work together, we could create a moment in time. That moment in time shouldn't ever be longer than 18 months. Even if it's not, so let's say their big goal is to retire in 5 years. Then what I would be doing is saying, well, okay, what could we do within the next 18 months that would be a stepping stone onto the fact that they'll have retired, be on track to retire in 5 years. It might be that they're sitting there 9 months from now on a beach and they're comfortable with being on that beach and they're happy because they know that they're on track to be able to retire in 5 years' time. Really got to try and make that as visual and use all the senses possible. So you'll notice I talked about the visual of the cherry blossom and the sunset. Hopefully the cherry blossom may even have, I could have even mentioned about the smell of the cherry blossom. Having not been to Japan, this was always, and you have, this is what was challenging, so I have to be a little bit generic. The taste of the sake. So you're trying to get them to be using simulating all the senses. You want to describe it. It wants to be one moment in time. So you'll notice it wasn't, you've done the skiing and then you've done this and then you go back. It was one moment in time, but thinking back to the fact that you've done this amazing tour around Japan, but also looking forward to saying, actually, I'm really excited about getting home because all these things are happening. It's all based in one moment, but you're using the ability to look back and look forward to create a bigger moment. And then you want to ask, how would that feel? And judging from your reaction, my torch wasn't a million miles away because it looked like that was motivating you. That was quite exciting to be there 18 months from now. That won't always be the case. If you've really hit the nail on the head, you'll see them well up because you've basically just described their perfect future. If you haven't hit the nail on the head, then it's what I would call a soggy torch. So you've kind of missed the mark somewhere. And what I would then do is I'd go back a step and I'd say, look, but what have I missed? What would need to be what would need to be in that moment for you to be genuinely happy? Because sometimes people are like, yeah, that'd be okay. Okay, I've just described the best future ever, and you're telling me it's okay. I've missed the mark somewhere. So I'd just genuinely open it up again and say, well, look, what have I missed? What could make it even better? You really, throughout those questions, you really want to be empathizing with the client, as much eye contact as possible. Because you're recording exploration meeting, you don't need to make extensive notes. It's quite good to make the odd word or two because it's easier to go back to this than it is to go back to the recording. But you really got to be making eye contact as much as possible. Of course, for the exploration meeting, you should be sat on the end of a table, so you're at a 90-degree angle to the client. Builds brilliant rapport. It also means there's no barrier, a desk or anything between you and the client when you're speaking to them. You've really got to be engaged. Now, if they get emotional during the exploration or the kinder questions, you've really got to just make sure that you keep that eye contact. And because they'll sometimes, when they get emotional, they'll look elsewhere. But what's absolutely vital is when they come back to you, because they will come back to your eye contact, you're already waiting. If you're looking at your computer when they're having an emotional moment, then they're like, oh, he's not listening to me. Even if you are listening, you're not engaged. So it's really important there's lots of eye contact during those kinder questions. You want to be showing real empathy, so really trying to, you might want to slow your voice down, maybe soften it a little bit. Gutturals, so yes. And you also want to confirm that you're understanding. So sometimes I'll be talking about something emotional, and you might want to say something like, you know, yeah, I can see that was really important to you, or you really care for that person, or you know, just try and be as empathetic as possible through that, because that will help them go through that journey. And if they do get emotional, you've got to let them see that journey out. So it's very easy, particularly as a bloke, if they start crying or welling up, you're like, oh God, I've got to fix this quickly, help.
Yeah.
Whereas much better is to let them go through that emotional roller coaster. So they'll get upset, they'll probably look away, they'll probably then come back to your eyes, they might then look away again, but they'll almost, once they're ready, once they're through that moment, you've got to just keep pausing, don't say anything, let them have that journey. It'll feel like an eternity, the silence will. For you, for them, it feels completely normal. And what will end up happening is once they've gone through that little emotional roller coaster, they'll probably give you a little nod. And the fact that you've given them that moment is really powerful. And you'll get people saying, well, I've never had a conversation with somebody like this. And it's because you're allowing them to go through those emotions and thinking about this stuff. So there's a few tips there. There's more in the unique method document, but that's the things that spring to mind. Then on the DOS question, and 9 months from now, you're just kind of asking them to almost now quantify how they expect us to help them in these situations. And then the wow element.
Could say.
It could say, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I don't know how I managed to paste that in there. But if some clients won't want to answer that, that's fine. But I always say some people find it a bit of a cheesy question, you know, what to wow. I say, well, look, you know, it's different for everybody. You know, some people, it's just replying to emails promptly. Other people, it's about investment growth. So it's just trying to understand really what we need to do to really impress them. Okay, so going on from that, what I would then do is going back to the client conversation, I suppose. Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much for going through that. It gives me a much, much better understanding of what's important to you in the future. So I think in the efficient financial plan, what we should be doing for you is, the first thing we need to do is take stock of what's already there. Look at those existing ISAs and pensions, and just make sure that, you know, what you need to be happening with them is, you know, are they as good as they could be? Could we get that money to work a little bit harder for you? Second thing we need to do is, you've already highlighted it yourself, but we really need to build the lifetime cash flow forecast. A lifetime cash flow forecast is going to be, it's the tool that we help model, it helps us model your financial future. So it's going to be this tool that we use to say, well, are you on track to be able to retire when you want to retire? Are you on? Could you afford to be going to Japan in 18 months' time to do this amazing trip? Could you afford to get into other business opportunities in the future? That's the tool that we can use to say, well, okay, are we on the right track? And if we're not, what changes can we make today to make sure we are on the right track? We need to obviously get your money working a little bit harder for you, so we need to get some get that tax planning there, so that we can get you to this kind of financial freedom in the future that much more quickly. The more growth you can hang on to yourself, the less tax that you pay on your investments, the quicker that you can get to financial freedom. So we really need to be doing that. And really, then, if we've got this plan laid out to say, if we're getting the money to work hard enough, then we're going to be okay at 65. That's pretty much the plan done. Except, obviously, that assumes everything goes according to plan. And as you've already highlighted, if something unexpected happens to you, potentially that's going to derail the plan completely and leave the people you care most about in trouble. So we need to just make sure that if something unexpected happens, that there's enough money there to look after the people that you care about. And if something really serious happens, i.e. you or your wife were to pass away, or even both, then we also need to make sure what you want to happen to your money does happen, and in the most tax effective and protected way possible. So we need to just think about what would happen there. So I suppose in summary, what we'd be doing is we'd be looking at the existing investments and pensions to get them to work as hard for you as possible. We'd then build a lifetime cash flow forecast to make sure that we can create the financial future that you want. And then what we'd also be doing is we'd be looking at making sure that if something unexpected happened, that the people that were left behind had sufficient money to be able to live their life, and so it doesn't derail the plan. But also if something serious happened to one of you, and what you wanted to happen to your money actually did. Does that sound like the sort of plan that you'd be looking for?
Yeah, that sounds brilliant.
Okay, fantastic. So the efficient financial plan fee for that work would be £2,424.
Okay.
That's the fee that's covered by the 100% money back guarantee. So if for any reason you're not happy with it, you can have that money back. Now the process from here on in is that we would send you a exploration meeting follow-up after this meeting. That's going to come from Katie, my client relationship manager. So she's going to send you a summary of what's going to be in the financial plan for you. She's going to send you the electronic versions of these documents, so you can chuck away the paper if you want to. She's going to send you a behavioural finance questionnaire. So just a click-through link, ask you about 30 questions, take you about 10 minutes, but it's a really important step in the process so that we can build you an investment portfolio that's in line with your levels of risk that you're comfortable with. It will also give you a much better understanding of risk than you'll ever had before, I suspect. And in due course, there'll obviously be an invoice. But actually, with the invoice, because you've been referred in by Charlotte, you're entitled to a referral discount. So actually, that's going to bring that plan fee down from £2,424 to £1,939. So yeah, Katie will send you that exploration meeting follow-up. Now I just need you to, if you want to go ahead, and you don't need to make a decision today if you don't want to, but if I need you to sign a couple of bits of paper. I've noticed from the pack that I'm one letter of authority short. So what I'll do is I'll just go and get a copy of this done, and while I'm doing it, it'll give you a moment to just think about and have a chat about whether whether you want to go ahead. So leave the room, give them a minute or two to think about it. A few other excuses that you might want to use for that is, sometimes they're already, you can see they're itching to talk about this. So you can just say, look, I just need to pop out for a minute, give you a moment to chat about it. If it's a couple, it's a really good thing to do. If it's an individual, it's probably less benefit, but even sometimes with an individual, I've done that, what gets nicknamed the toilet close. But it genuinely just gives them a moment or two, or a few minutes to think about it, whether they want to go ahead. Okay, brilliant. So you've had a chance to think about it. I'll show you what we need doing if you do want to go ahead. By the way, do you want to go ahead with the plan?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So I've got a couple of documents here. By the way, if you weren't completely happy with going ahead now, you can still sign these documents and leave them with us, because on them we ask whether you're happy to proceed with the plan or whether you want 14 days to think about it. Even then, we're not going to do a plan for you if you don't want us to do so, particularly given there's a money back guarantee in place. So I'll just need you to sign this consent document. I'll also write the plan fee down here. That was £1,939. So this is consent document, is to say that you're happy to work under our terms of business. This is to say that you're happy to pay the plan fees. And then I also need you to sign some letters of authority. Now, this can be a letter of authority or a transfer of servicing letter. It doesn't allow us to make any changes to your policies. It just allows us to write to them and get the information that allows us to do the plan. The difference between the two is, one, the transfer of servicing appoints us as the servicing agent. If you haven't got an existing advisor that's currently servicing these policies, we might as well do a transfer of servicing letter. It just means we'll always be able to get the information, whereas a letter of authority will be a temporary depending on the company, 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, that sort of thing. Whereas that appoints us permanently. But assuming, if you're happy to go ahead, I just need to sign each of these. Just sign this one in the bottom left-hand corner, and we'll fill out the details because you provided to us. That's brilliant. Thank you for signing those. That's it. So in terms of the time frame, the plan is going to take us usually about 3 months to complete. It'll take us about a month to gather in all the information. It'll take us about a month to analyse that and about a month to write the plan. Throughout that process, Katie will be in contact with you, my client relationship manager, keeping you updated with the timeframes. If for any reason, if you've got any questions or anything like that, fire them at Katie. She's there to be on hand to answer any questions. If she can't answer them, then obviously she'll call on me and we'll get an answer to you as soon as we can. But liaise with Katie, she'll be your point of contact throughout the process. Once we've got the plan written, we'll send it out to you, we'll get the planning meeting booked in, and at the same time as we send you the plan, we'll send you a planning meeting prep sheet. It's really important that when you go through the plan, you fill out that prep sheet and you return it to us prior to the planning meeting, because that way, if, for example, you've got particular questions or concerns about a particular area, or once you've seen the lifetime cash flow forecast, you want us to model a slightly different scenario, then you can let us know, and that means that we can come to the planning meeting already organised with those questions in mind. So we'll get that, but yeah, as I say, it'll take about 3 months, and we'll get the planning meeting booked in for that. Any questions for me before we wind up?
No, all sounds good.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We look forward to working with you and building that plan. We'll get it to you as soon as we can, and as I say, we'll keep you in the loop. If you can just make sure that you do those first steps in that Katie will carry out in the expiration meeting follow-up, that would be brilliant. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the planning meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Anything that I can summarise there? So a couple of things that are worth pointing out. I did. Firstly, I mentioned as soon as I mentioned the plan fee, I mentioned the 100% money back guarantee. Really important you emphasise that, because one of the biggest barriers people have is that they say, well, I don't. It's a big decision to say yes to go ahead and write a cheque for £2,000 after just an hour and a half meeting. But that 100% money back guarantee is essentially their protection to say, look, actually, if I make a bad decision, it's rubbish, they'll give me the money back. So it's really important you stress that. You'll notice I didn't mention the discount until after I explained the process. That's because what we're doing is we're giving them a few minutes to just process that, because if they're thinking, £2,400, a little bit more than I want to spend, if you then give them that discount afterwards, after they've processed that, they're like, oh, okay, brilliant, I was wavering at 2,400, but 1,900, yeah, okay, brilliant, let's get on with it. Just giving them that little bit of extra time to think about it, and it's quantifying it a little bit better. What I could have done, which would have been even better, is what would have been better would be to reference an amount of money beforehand. So, for example, I could have said, look, we're talking about investing, several £100,000 from the pensions and ISAs and things like that. At some point in the prior explanation of the plan. The reason that happens is because the client is then referencing the fact that it's £300,000. So actually a £2,000 fee to get advice on £300,000 doesn't feel that much. So it's sensible to try and do that. I rarely remember to do it, but it's a really good thing to do if you can. Anything else I should have done differently, or so yeah, giving them time to think is really important. But and then just once it gets, you don't need to be pushy about it. It's just a straightforward question. So, do you want to go ahead with the plan? Really straightforward. Sometimes people will still want time to think about it, but the more you can practice these concepts, the better. Okay, so that really is the end of the exploration meeting. You'll have noticed that what I was doing while I went through the exploration meeting was I was filling out the meeting follow-up as I went. What I would do post the exploration meeting is I'd go back to the Your Portfolio Explorer, highlight any gaps in the information in yellow. So for example, if they fail to give us the expiration, the policy number, go through and highlight it in yellow. Same, I didn't touch on Your Company Explorer as a business owner, but if that was the case, I'd highlight any gaps in that in yellow. What I then do is list all the policies that we want to review for them here, whether I've got the letter of authority or transfer of servicing letter, the cover letter that's needed. This should be copied in from this information here. So, is it a personal pension? Is it a final salary scheme? Because the info chaser won't always know that. A few different questions if they're about to crystallize, so there's different versions of the pensions letter there. Do we need the policy number? Have we not already got it? Sometimes I'll just say, don't bother writing to the provider because they've got an existing financial advisor they don't want to upset. So I'll put a note in here to say, actually don't write, just get the statements off the client. Then I'll update what's needed from the expiration meeting follow-up here. So behavioural risk questionnaire, almost always is going to be needed. ID, hopefully they've brought that to the expiration meeting, but if they've forgotten, it might be that we need to remind them to bring it to the planning meeting. I'll tell the client relationship manager whether they've completed the declaration and signed that there. Do they need a plan fee, yes or no? Is there highlighted information on the YP and the YC that needs to be requested in the expiration meeting follow-up? Any other bits of information? And finally, the time frame that I've told the client, 3 months usually, but sometimes there's situations where it needs to be different. What I then do is go through, I've made some notes in the DOS questions here, so I'd shift those across to the right-hand side, and then I would fill in either using free text or from these concerns and opportunities below. You'll find that probably 5 of the 6 things are already written out. You just need to tweak them. Like, for example, here you've got lifetime cash flow forecasting, but you may want to just tweak the explanation, and you'll definitely want to include tweaking the what if scenarios, including the prospect of buying your own home. So you can use these as much as you can, because I've obviously written these out for situations, but you'll even then you want to change. I'd try and get 3 in each area. Sometimes it'll only be 2, sometimes it'll be 4, but I'd try and find 3 in each area. Just seems to work quite nicely. And then I go onto the planning tab. I'd write which client it's for in here, what it is. So for example, maybe investment review, reasons why it's important to the client, and that roughly how we expect to implement it. Obviously, sometimes that's subject to research, but generally we know that it's going to be an ISA and a PIP, etc. And we already know that we think it's wealth time or premium or something like that because of the level of investment. I then do. This is the area to put in the key thoughts around, is there a lifetime allowance issue we need to think about? Do we need a carry forward contribution? All of that sort of stuff can go in here into each of the different areas. On the estate planning, it's really worth putting in the reason why to them the estate planning is important, whether it's protecting their family, making sure it goes down to the children. If they're on a second marriage, it might be about making sure that it goes to the individual children of the previous marriages, all those sorts of things, because that can be used really well in the plan. I'd go through and put in any extra information here, any background information I think is important, and then the different what if scenarios. And I've actually been quite often completing these what if scenarios through the course of the expiration meeting. As soon as they mention something like buying a new house, it's like, bingo, right, let's stick that in as a what if. Or Japan, right, I don't even know what I'm going to factor around that, but it just means that we pick off all of the different what if scenarios that we can. Then the final piece I would do is I would go to the implementation tab. I'd go through each area that I think needs completing and highlight it in orange. And in addition to that, I'd fill in the details of things like quotes that are needed. So income protection quotes, mortgage protection quotes, I'd fill in the details here. For mortgage protection and particularly mortgage protection, I would always do a quote for life and critical illness cover and a second quote for life only. That's usually not because I want to recommend life only, but because I think that if you do life only and the life and kick, it then means you can give them the figure for 50% of the mortgage covered from kick, but the full amount from life cover. And even in the planning meeting, because you've got those two figures, you can be saying, well, okay, you can't afford £100 a month, but we could get roughly this much of your mortgage covered for critical illness, the whole amount covered in the event of death for that premium that they can afford. So I'd go through, fill out that, and then I would send that to the power planner that's going to write the plan, the client relationship manager, and I'd also CC in Charlotte so that she can update them onto our marketing, make sure they get the newsletter, that sort of stuff. And that is pretty much the end of the process. Any other questions, anything that you picked up on there that I didn't do, any questions as to why I did certain things, or?
No, the only question I had, working through that, you ended up covering off anyway, in regards to the, you called it reference, when you mentioned 300,000, so we're going
to
X amount before you deliver the fee.
Great thing to do if you can remember to do it.
Yeah, no, that was it. Just double check on that.
I think,
I suppose, is there a key time?
I would say an hour and a half should be your target maximum. The trick to doing that is to not spending too long on your Portfolio Explorer.
Yeah.
My experience of seeing other advisors do this for the first time is they rush the first question. They then spend ages talking about your Portfolio Explorer, and then they rush through the Kinder questions. Really, for me, you should probably be spending a minimum of 5 minutes on that first question, but a maximum of 15 minutes. You've then got the explanation of the exploration meeting guide. Now, of course, we now in the process include a video that explains this. So what I should have done actually is ask them if they'd watched that video. If they've watched that video, you could just say, have you got any questions with it? And you could skip over that, and that will probably buy you another 5 minutes for the exploration meeting. With your Portfolio Explorer, I would really not get into too much detail there. That shouldn't be about giving advice. It should be about asking questions to make sure you know everything about the situation. But things like policy numbers and that sort of stuff, if it's there on a piece of paper in front of you, take it down then, because it's just easier. But if it's, don't get bogged down in the detail. You've got to try and keep that fairly snappy. And the Kinder questions and DOS probably should be a minimum of 15 minutes, but I would try and keep the exploration meeting in totals down to an hour and a half. I think much more than that, and you're going to need the client to go for toilet breaks, and then it's going to become really disjointed. I always put 2 hours in the diary though, so I want an hour and a half for the client meeting. You want to allow a little bit of buffer in case they turn up a little bit late, or you get bogged down in a particular area. And then you've got to have at least 15 minutes to just go through and finish off the meeting, follow up, do all the notes. The more notes you can put in there, as you know, the easier it is for the power planner to write the plan. So I would always block out 2 hours. I'd really try and keep the client time down to an hour and a half. It'll take practice, but that's where it should be capped out. Anything else? And I suppose the last thing, always wear suit and tie for an exploration meeting. It's part of our uniform, it's what they expect to see. So exploration meeting and planning meeting, always suit and tie. Great. Well, hopefully that has given you a few pointers as to how that can work for you.
This conference will now be recorded.
I suppose the only other thing with the Kinder questions is sometimes you will get somebody that completely closes it up and they're not going to talk about anything that you want to talk about here. For that, you will usually find that they're quite an analytical person, and the DOS question will work much better. So if you've really made very little progress through the Kinder questions, and particularly and also with the opening question, you may find that I would probably just skip the torch section completely, because you've got no real content for it. And I would just go straight to the DOS question, because if they're a more analytical person, they're probably going to be better at answering that question. If they struggle with the Kinder questions, what I would also ask them to do is, after the exploration meeting, I would ask them to complete in their own time the Heart's Core exercise. Now, it's already been given to them in Your Portfolio Explorer, but it sometimes helps people, I suppose, for the same reason that DOS questions work. This seems to work quite well for those people that really struggle with the Kinder questions. So you can ask them to complete that afterwards as a bit of homework. I wouldn't ask the Kinder questions at all for somebody that was, so for example, a trustee or a charity, those sorts of situations for corporate, but I definitely always ask the DOS question, because that works for everybody, whereas of course the Kinder one is very much a personal thing. But when I first started asking it, asking those Kinder questions, I thought they were going to be really awkward. Now, because it's the norm, I just don't think it is ever at all awkward. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with those questions, but that's generally because they've never asked those questions of themselves. And the fact that you're asking them, they will give you a lot of respect for. But it can be difficult for people to answer them. But your job is there to help facilitate the thinking process. And as I said already, long pauses to allow them to think can feel uncomfortable, but actually, when you get used to it, it's really powerful, because they'll break before you. If you're comfortable with a pause, they'll break. And if you go anything else, then you can just sit there and wait. And they will break. I'm going to have to say, yeah. But it really is very, very powerful, the pause, but it can be uncomfortable to start with. But as I said, there's more tips in the unique method, and hopefully you will get, and ultimately it's about practice, practice, practice. The more times you do this, the more comfortable you are with it, the more normal it then is as part of the process, and the easier it is. I always segue that the Your Portfolio Explorer into Kinder by saying, I now want to ask you some questions about your future, because it's given them the context as to why you're now asking them these questions that they didn't expect. So it's like, right, okay, I understand this is part of the process, and I understand why he's doing this. For me, because I do that, I've never really had a client saying, why on earth are you asking me these questions? It's not because I've already told them. It's because I want to know more about your future. So if you do that, you shouldn't have a problem.